When you think about India, you have to think about its rivers. They're not just lines on a map, are they? They're literally the country's lifeblood, the arteries that have been pumping life into the subcontinent for millennia. Everything from the landscape to culture, even history itself, has been shaped by them.
And just, wow, look at this incredible network. It's this huge, sprawling web that crisscrosses the entire subcontinent. But here's what's so fascinating, and this is really the key. It's not just one big unified system. Nope, it's actually split into two totally different groups of rivers. Each one has its own origin story, its own personality, and a completely different rhythm.
And this really breaks it down perfectly. Think of them as having two totally different personalities. On one hand, you've got the Himalayan rivers. These are the young, powerful ones, born from the ice of the world's tallest mountains. And because they're glacier-fed, they flow all year round. But then on the other side, you've got the Peninsular rivers. These are the ancient ones, true children of the monsoon. Their entire existence is tied to the rhythm of the seasonal rains. All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the big picture, India's lifeblood. Then we'll get into the two main river families, the ones born of ice and the ones born of rain. After that, we'll see how all this water gets harnessed. And finally, we'll touch on the serious challenges the whole system is up against today.
Okay, so let's jump right into our first section. To really get a handle on all of this, we've got to start with the basics, and that means understanding what a drainage system actually is. It's kind of like the blueprint that controls how all this water moves around.
So a drainage system isn't just one river, right? It's the whole shebang. It's the main river, all the smaller streams and tributaries that feed into it, the lakes, basically everything that drains a specific area, which we call a basin. And you gotta understand, this is a seriously powerful force. It literally carves up the landscape and decides where people can live and build civilization.
Okay, let's get to our first major category, the rivers born of ice. We're talking about the Himalayan rivers here. These are the absolute giants of the system. They're geologically young, super powerful, and they're fed by those massive glaciers and snowfields high up in the Himalayas.
And the scale here, it's just staggering, isn't it? What you're looking at is the Ganges-Brahmaputra Basin. This isn't just any river basin, it's one of the most fertile and densely packed places on Earth. You can almost trace the epic journey of these two titans as they come pouring down from the mountains and snake their way across the massive northern plains.
And right at the very heart of this system, you have the Ganges, or the Ganga. It starts its journey way up in the Gangotri Glacier. But, you know, it is so much more than just a river. For hundreds of millions of people, it's a sacred goddess. It's an absolute lifeline for everything, farming, industry, daily life. It's hard to overstate it. A huge chunk of India's population depends entirely on this one river system.
Then you've got its mighty counterpart, the Brahmaputra. And this river has a wild story. It actually starts in Tibet, where it's called the Yarlung Tsengpo. It flows east for hundreds of miles. And then, get this, it makes this incredible, dramatic hairpin turn south, slashing its way right into India. It's famous for its raw power, those super wide braided channels you see in Assam, and the amazing biodiversity it supports.
And of course, we can't forget the third Himalayan giant, the Indus. This river also starts up on the Tibetan Plateau, and it's the river that literally gave India its name. I mean, think about that. It was the cradle for one of the world's first great civilizations, the Indus Valley Civilization, and today it's still absolutely critical for agriculture and hydropower all across the region.
All right, let's completely switch gears. We're going to take a hard turn south now. We're leaving behind the young, towering Himalayas and heading into the ancient, weathered landscape of peninsular India. And down here, the rivers tell a totally different story. This one isn't born of ice, it's born of rain.
And you can see that different story right away on this map. Unlike the Himalayan rivers, these guys are geologically ancient. I mean, they've had millions of years to carve out these really stable, mature paths. They start in the western and eastern Ghats. Those are the mountain ranges that frame the Deccan Plateau. And their flow, their entire existence really, is all about the monsoon.
This table here gives you a really good sense of scale. Now, don't get me wrong, these are still massive rivers, but you can see that they're generally shorter than their Himalayan cousins. The big players down here are the Godavari, Krishna, and Narmada. Each one carves its own unique path right through the heart of the peninsula. So most of the big peninsular rivers, like the Godavari, Krishna, and Kaveri, they all flow eastward and empty out into the Bay of Bengal. The Godavari is so important, it's often called the Dakshin Ganga, which means the Ganges of the south. And here's why that's so crucial. Where they meet the sea,
They create these huge, incredibly fertile deltas. These are basically the rice bowls of southern India.
But there are always exceptions, right? And there are two big ones that break that eastward rule, the Narmada and the Tapi. These two actually flow west, rushing through these deep valleys before they empty into the Arabian Sea. The Narmada is especially well known, not just for its deep religious meaning, but also for its incredible beauty as it cuts a path right between two major mountain ranges.
So, okay, we've met the two big river families, the icy giants from the north and the ancient rain-fed rivers of the south. But you know, these rivers are so much more than just lines on a map. So the big question is, how does this massive, life-giving flow of water actually shape the lives of more than 1 billion people?
And that question brings us to a really critical topic, harnessing the flow. For millions and millions of people, survival literally depends on being able to control, store, and move the water from these rivers to where it's needed most.
I mean, the engineering involved here is just on another level. It's colossal. Just look at some of these examples. Massive dams like the Bahakar Dam or the Nagarjuna Sagar Dam. They were built to create these gigantic reservoirs. And these projects are total game changers. They store that unpredictable monsoon water for the dry seasons, they generate a ton of electricity, and they feed these huge canal networks that make it possible to farm in places that would otherwise be desert.
But all of this intense reliance comes at a cost, a pretty steep one. Today, this ancient, vital system is really buckling under the strain of all these modern pressures.
And the challenges are just huge. First, you've got a booming population and economy that create this relentless demand for water, which leads to scarcity. Then, at the same time, the water that we do have is often badly polluted by waste from cities and factories. And to top it all off, we're pumping out groundwater way, way faster than nature can refill it. We're draining the very underground reserves that are supposed to be our safety net.
And all of this leaves us with a really critical question, one that will define the future. These rivers, both the Himalayan giants and the Peninsular ancients, they're the foundation of India's past, and they are absolutely the key to its future. So the challenge is just enormous. As India continues to grow, how can it possibly balance the demands of modern development with the health of these ancient, sacred rivers that have sustained it for thousands of years?